This video is an overview of the UW Extension Replacement Heifer cost worksheet put together by Bill Halfman, Ryan Sterry, and Amanda Cauffman, and was reviewed by Dr. Megan Nelson, UW Extension Livestock Program Director, and Dr. Garland Dalkey, the Iowa Beef Center at Iowa State University. The purpose of this spreadsheet tool is to help beef producers look at their costs from raising replacement heifers from weaning up until they calve into the beef cow herd. It is a series of several spreadsheets that all look at different components. We'll go through the summary sheet here where we start out. At the beginning, we have an opportunity cost. For instance, if you're retaining your own heifers, you would enter in the number of heifers, what their weight is, what you could have sold them for when you normally sell your feeder calves, so they have an opportunity cost against them, and that calculates that out. If you're buying heifers to raise them and breed them, then you could put in your actual purchase price. And we have a section here because sometimes they don't always get to calving, so any of the heifers that were in that group, we would enter in here that got sold prior to calving and what they sold for, because their revenue would then go against the expenses for the group as a whole. As we move down here, we enter in the number of acres of pasture that the group was assigned to, and an annual rental rate for the pasture if you would have rented out for somebody else to use rather than using it yourself. Blue cells are the sections where you enter in your numbers. The yellow boxes are going to come in from other sheets in the spreadsheet tool that helps you do all the math, and everything in this summary page is broken out into two columns: a total cost column for the entire group, and then a per head column where it's broken out on a per head basis. And as we go down through here, we can see several of the pasture expenses itemized out, and we move down farther and we see some of the other livestock expenses. There may be some interest expenses, feed, or other things, and this is your actual interest, not your estimated. And in some bedding that might be used during the course of typically in a spring calving herd, the 2 winters before they would calve in. We got a couple of miscellaneous for other supplies and transportation. And then during that time that they are in dry lot, overtime wintering, if they are in a dry lot situation, you could enter that in. Some people might winter them on pasture, and then you would not necessarily have those expenses. And at the bottom, we've got our total expenses broken out as total cost for the group and then cost per head to raise them.
The second tab of the heifer closeout spreadsheet is where you will record the fencing and pasture expenses. There are 3 sections. The first section being where you will record the costs associated with forage quality and repairs, such as seed, herbicide, and fertilizer. Seed may include pasture establishment depending on your crop rotation. It may also include seed costs for interseeding legumes. Some of these direct costs are not acquired every year, but should be prorated out over their expected useful life. For example, seed costing $48 with a 3-year useful life, the spreadsheet will calculate the annual prorated costs. You can then allocate the percentage of use for this group of heifers, and the spreadsheet will calculate the costs allocated to this group of heifers. In moving down the page, you will find where you can record the permanent and temporary fencing costs. You can lump the costs together or itemize them out, but we do suggest keeping the 2 categories separate. These sections are much like the previous section in that the costs can be prorated and allocated for each group of heifers. For example, the perimeter barbed wire fence costing $2,700 with an 18-year useful life, the spreadsheet will go ahead and calculate the annual depreciation expense. You can then plug in the percentage of use for this group of heifers to get a total cost allocated to this group of heifers for that perimeter fence. We have also embedded a link to a spreadsheet developed by Iowa State University that can be used to help determine fencing costs.
Next, we have the machinery and equipment tab for the replacement heifer enterprise budget. In our top section here, we want to look at machinery that's used for managing the heifer enterprise. In this case, we have a tractor and brush hog for managing the pastures. We want to look at what's the current market value and estimate what you think the ending value will be and years of useful life to come up with an annual depreciation expense, a particular piece of equipment that goes towards the heifer enterprise. So in this case, this tractor is used for multiple other things on the farm, so you don't want to allocate all that charge to the heifer rearing expenses. If we move down, we do something similar with machinery leases. If you have any of those, the only difference would be you don't have the years of useful life and estimated ending value to have to compute here. And if we keep moving down this tab, we get into our fuel, oil, and utilities expenses, and also any machinery repair expenses. One thing that we want to remind users of when using the machinery and equipment tab is we don't want to be double counting any machinery, equipment, lease expenses, whatnot, that are already included in the yardage expense, which is calculated on the first tab of the spreadsheet.
The next tab in the spreadsheet is the purchased and harvest and feed cost calculator. And one thing we want to point out at the top is an Adobe Acrobat logo that is an embedded file that helps with feed storage loss estimate. As one of the places where we sometimes forget about is feed shrink. This particular section is broken out into two categories: winter feed and or feed while the animals are in a dry lot. And in our example here, which would be typical for most spring calving beef cow operation, replacement heifers will be around 2 winters, from the first year right after weaning and then the second year winter before they calve. And in our example here, we've actually got it broken out: first winter and second winter. You enter in a description of the feed. Everything is in tons, so how many tons you actually presented to the animals, put in front of them, your storage loss, and a price for the feed. If it's homegrown feed, you could enter in an opportunity cost, what you could sell it for, and any feeds that are purchased, you would have a bill for those to be able to enter that information in. And you also need to enter in the days that they're fed in the dry lot, so that this will break it out for you on a feed cost per head per day to help you look at that number as well. And then in the next section here, we've got any sort of supplementation when they're out on pasture. That could include both purchased and any homegrown supplements if you do any grain or anything like that. So in our example here, again, it's how much mineral and salt we have in here, and you put that in again as tons, a shrink loss, and the price, and it calculates that out and then shows you also what your daily feed cost is when you enter in the number of days that they're out on pasture. At the bottom here, we have some price adjusters for adjusting feeds based on moisture contents, or if it's ear corn versus shell corn kind of a thing, for a per ton basis to help come up with the numbers that need to go in the price categories in the above sections of this spreadsheet.
The Artificial Insemination, Veterinary, and Pharmaceutical tab is where you can record expenses associated with breeding, pharmaceuticals, and veterinary services for both the entire group and on an individual basis. In the AI and reproduction related expenses, you can plug in the date, you can plug in the costs, such as semen, CEDARs, or hormone shots, and their total costs, and it'll calculate the cost per head calving. The pharmaceutical for both group treatments and individual treatments are much the same as the AI section, where you can plug in the date, the time administered, product used or service provided, and the total cost. And again, the spreadsheet is going to go ahead and calculate your cost per head calving. The user can also record withdrawal times by inputting the appropriate information. The withdrawal time columns are provided for your convenience, and they do not impact the cost analysis if you choose not to use them. Once a user has input all the expenses for the group and individual treatments, the spreadsheet will also calculate the total vet and health expenses at the bottom of the spreadsheet. You can also find a pharmaceutical cost calculator to help you calculate the cost per treatment. All the products and withdrawal times used in this tab are only examples, and UW-Madison Division of Extension does not promote any of these products over the use of others.
Our next tab is the bull expense calculator. This tab is used to calculate costs for using natural service bulls to breed your heifer herd. At the top, we have bulls that you have on the farm. You may have one, you may have multiple. Next, we want to go through what is the purchase price, years you intend to keep that particular bull, and your best estimate of what the cull income might be from when you sell that bull to come up with this annual depreciation cost. In this example, we have one bull, so we're going to keep moving down in this tab. We want to have you enter the number of bulls to allocate these costs across, and we're going to look at what's your pasture expense, pharmaceuticals, what's the cost to conduct a breeding soundness exam, which we highly encourage you to do, and other veterinary expenses. We do want to emphasize this annual pasture expense. It's when the bull's not running with the cow herd or heifer herd. We're assuming that those expenses are going to be covered by that side of the enterprise when the bull is actually out with the cows. As we keep going down, other related expenses for having a bull on the farm, we want you to think about. They might be bedding, they might be yardage and whatnot to come up with a total related expense for having that bull on the farm. Similar to what we do with the heifer budget, we want to look at what's your feeding cost for that bull. So that here's a winter ration for while the bull is in dry lot. Also, in some instances, you might want to look at what's your supplement cost when the bull is on pasture. And finally, we get to the bottom where we calculate the days on supplemental feed, same as we would have you do if they're on dry lot, to come up with total related feed and depreciation expense. The last thing that we want you to remember to enter into here, the number of cows or heifers a bull is going to be exposed to, so we can calculate this cost on a per head basis. Our final tab in the heifer enterprise budget is your labor expenses. So labor is divided into paid and unpaid, same as management is also divided into paid and unpaid. We do want to emphasize unpaid labor is not included in the calculations for the total cost. However, we really feel this is an important number for you to have for your own knowledge. So to make this particular tab work, we need to know the number of weeks the replacement heifer enterprise will take place. Are you raising your heifers all the way to calving? Or in some cases, you might pick a shorter time period where you're raising heifers for a short time and reselling them or raising them for somebody else. As we move down, we try to keep this simple. What's your estimate of hours of labor per week? What is the hourly wage you are charging to come up with this total paid labor expense? In the unpaid labor works very similarly. In this case, we don't have any unpaid labor. And that, again, that number isn't included in the total calculation. It's just to give you an idea of what you're putting into the enterprise out of your own unpaid labor. Works very similar when we move down to labor and management.